Two U.S. Marshals were sent to an asylum on a remote island to investigate a disappearance of a patient. Hi, welcome back to Explanation Pro. Today we will recap a mysterious movie called Shutter Island. Spoiler alert. Watch out and take care. At the beginning of the film, we see a ship with two detectives on it. The main protagonist is named Teddy and his partner is Chuck. It seems like both Teddy and Chuck don't know each other and just met on this new case. Teddy tells Chuck he lost his wife in a fire while he was at work. We see the island they are heading towards. It's quiet and very spooky. Upon their arrival, they meet another police officer who also works at an asylum. Guards around them look very shady and alert. They all keep staring at Teddy and Chuck. Before entering the asylum, the officer asks them to hand over their weapons. On their way, Teddy sees inmates doing gardening. One keeps smiling at him while an old lady behaves very suspiciously. Inside, they meet Dr. John, who tells them about a girl who went missing. Both detectives have to find out what happened to this girl. This girl was one of the patients named Rachel. She had murdered her 3 kids by drowning them. He tells them she has created a fake reality where she believes her children are still alive. They have no idea how mentally ill women escaped from the asylum. The room she was kept in always had its door locked and the window was barricaded by metal grills. While looking around the room, Teddy finds out a small note which says, "The Law of 4, who is 67. Teddy wants to get all the records from the asylum that contains patients' information, but Dr. John denies giving anything. Later, we see Teddy and Chuck, who have joined several officers outside the asylum in the forest. They are searching for Rachel everywhere. Teddy asks if she can hide in one of the small caves. But it seems impossible for a girl to climb down such a steep cliff. In the next scene, we see Teddy interrogating the asylum staff. He wants to know exactly what happened on the night of the disappearance. He wants to talk with Dr. Sheehan, but he cannot as Dr. Sheehan is on vacation. Sheehan was Rachel's personal doctor. Later, we see Teddy and Chuck visiting Dr. John's mansion for dinner. There they meet another doctor named Naring, who is German and a friend of Dr. John. Looking at him, Teddy gets a flashback of a German soldier dying in front of his eyes. This flashback takes place in World War II. At night, both detectives are given a bunk bed in the hospital to sleep in. Teddy gets a dream of his ex-wife. His wife tells him that Rachel is still on the island. Teddy goes to hug her as she keeps talking. She says Lattice is here and that Teddy can't leave. Everything around him starts to burn down and he gets up in fear, covered in sweat. By this time, the storm on the island has got worse. The detectives meet Dr. John, who tells them this asylum always treats their patients with respect and care. To get some leads, Teddy and Chuck meet with Rachel's other patient friends. They ask them about her behavior. Firstly, we see them interrogating a lady who murdered her husband. Teddy asks about Dr. Sheehan, who was the primary doctor for Rachel. Upon this question, the lady gets nervous and asks for a glass of water. While Chuck goes to get some water, the lady quickly writes something in Teddy's notebook. Teddy after this asks her if she knows a patient named Andrew. She says no in a nervous tone. Chuck is curious about this Andrew guy and asks Teddy who is Andrew. Teddy reveals that Andrew is the guy who started the fire that killed his wife. He was sent here, but now even Andrew is done missing. Teddy is suspicious that Andrew might be kept in a high-level security ward. On their way, Teddy admits he accepted this case just so he can get on this island to find Andrew. But the storm gets wild and both detectives have to take shelter in an old building. They both start talking as Teddy tells his war story. He shares the time when he and his other soldier friends had to kill surrendered Germans. He also thinks that this asylum conducts an illegal experiment on patients. An old patient named George told Teddy that the asylum conducts illegal experiments. Later, Teddy and Chuck visit Dr. John to ask if there is patient 67 in the asylum. The doctor confirms that there are only 66 patients in the asylum and also that the officers found Rachel. Teddy goes to meet Rachel and wants to know where she hid all this time. They both get a bit emotional, which is weird that they don't know each other. Later we see Teddy getting a severe headache and a bright light falls onto him from the sky. Both detectives head down to the basement to sleep. After sleeping, Teddy gets a spooky nightmare where he sees a woman and a little girl's dead body on the ground. They both seem to be frozen, but suddenly they open their eyes. The little girl tells him he could have saved them. The dream scene changes and Teddy sees Andrew, the murderer of his wife, with a big bloody scar on his forehead. We then see Rachel, who looks a bit different and is covered in blood. She is smiling and her 3 kids are dead near her. Teddy picks up the little girl. The girl opens her eyes and asks, "Why didn't you save me?" Teddy, while crying, says he tried his best to save her but failed. The dream scene again changes as we see him with a girl near a lake. He puts her in the water crying. Teddy's emotional connection to this case is slowly breaking him down. We see Teddy getting up in chaos where asylum staff is running everywhere to organize the patients. Everyone outside is busy cleaning up the mess Storm left behind. Looking at this chaos and rush, Chuck says this is the perfect distraction to go and check that high-security ward where we might find Andrew. Out of nowhere, a patient catches Teddy's eye. Teddy follows this patient in the high-security ward. Inside the dark ward, we can't probably see anything. Suddenly the patient jumps from behind. Teddy somehow fights back and starts to choke the patient. Chuck with a security guard stops Teddy from going any further. Chuck and the security guard take away the patient, leaving Teddy alone in the ward. Teddy continues his search. On his way, he meets George, who is alone in a dark and dirty cell. George tells Teddy that the asylum is playing with him. There is no real case and Chuck is not a trustable ally. He reminds Teddy that Chuck and him have never worked on a case together. Teddy also sees his wife, who says he should forget about her. Teddy says he can't do that. George says Andrew is not in this ward and that he might be kept in the lighthouse. After getting out, Teddy meets Chuck. He is suspicious of Chuck and decides to head toward the lighthouse alone. On his way, he sees that the storm has increased the sea level. He goes back to Chuck, but he is nowhere to be seen. Teddy sees Chuck's dead body lying down the cliff. To check on him, Teddy slowly starts to climb down. When he reaches the bottom, the body is gone. He sees some rats crowded in a small hole. Teddy's eyes fall on a cave that is sparkling. While climbing towards the cave, we see piles of rats running here and there. Inside the cave, Teddy sees the real Rachel. She seems completely normal and kind. She explains to Teddy that she doesn't have any kids and that she was one of the doctors in the asylum. She tried to investigate the large suspicious shipments the asylum was receiving. She had a doubt that the asylum is conducted some sort of experiment on the patients. Teddy, with this new information, leaves the cave and runs into the warden, who offers to take him back to the asylum. Teddy asks Dr. John if he saw his partner Chuck, but the doctor replies that Teddy came here alone. Teddy is getting a more uncanny vibe from this place and decides to escape the hospital. Getting inside his car, he again gets a vision of his dead wife. She tells him to go on the ferry. Teddy thinks Chuck is kidnapped. Later, we see Chuck making his way to the lighthouse finally. He knocks down a guard and snatches a rifle. Inside the lighthouse, he sees Dr. John sitting very calmly. The doctor tells him the rifle he is holding is empty. To confront the doctor, Teddy tells him about how he found the real Rachel and that he knows everything about the island. On this, Dr. John says that the Rachel he saw in the caves was one of his visions. And in fact, the 67th patient in the asylum is Teddy. He shows Teddy that his real name is actually Andrew. He was brought to the asylum because he killed his wife after she murdered their 3 kids. The doctor proceeds to explain that whenever Teddy had a vision of others, he made everything up. He was guilty about his actions, and that's why he created a false reality to pretend like he is the hero. That's why he became Teddy, who is a detective trying to save innocent people. From behind we see Chuck walking into the room, and it is revealed that actually, Chuck is Sheehan, the primary doctor for Chuck. We get to see that Chuck and Dr. John planned this enormous Rachel case just so they can show Teddy his true identity. The doctor explains that if this plan fails to bring back Andrew, then they will have no other choice but to lobotomize Andrew. In a panic, Andrew grabs a pistol and threatens to kill them. But his pistol is fake. Andrew then physically attacks Dr. Sheehan. To stop him, Dr. John shows Andrew a picture of his dead child. Looking at these pictures, Andrew starts to tear up and we are taken back into a flashback. We see that Andrew was a U.S. detective and that his wife tried to commit suicide by burning their house. But later his family was relocated near a lake. His wife killed all 3 of his children. He cries as he is pulling his children out of the lake. To stop this madness, Andrew is forced to kill his wife by shooting her. Andrew gets up from the flashback. He finds himself in patient clothes, and the nurse around him is a girl who played Rachel in this experiment. At last, Andrew seems to have accepted the reality. He says he felt guilty for not getting his wife the mental health treatment she needed. And that's why he always blamed himself for the death of his children. He says that his name is Andrew and confesses he killed his wife. At the end of the movie, we see Andrew and Sheehan sitting on the stairs smoking. Out of nowhere, Andrew calls him with the name Chuck instead of Sheehan. He says they have to escape from this island. Chuck, in a subtle look, shook his head, signaling Dr. John. Dr. John, disappointed, says something to the other doctor and the warden. The warden gives out a signal and suddenly everyone in the area starts to approach Andrew. Andrew notices a person holding surgical tools coming near them. Andrew looks at Chuck, or might we say, Sheehan. He asks Chuck if it would be worse to live as a monster or to die as a good man. Andrew gets up and follows the other people. In the end, we see the lighthouse. Most probably, Andrew was lobotomized.